So I only have the overhead lights on. I hope that this is okay for you to see. I probably should not have written some things in a lighter shade of green on the dry erase board, but in order to get this done today and to make this just 3 videos, I know there's a lot of passages here. We're going to talk about most of them, but this is stuff you're going to want to read on your own because we're trying to figure out all that we can about the gates. All right, we know Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. Daniel 9, verse 26, Luke 21, verse 24, some of the passages in scripture that speak about that in the left column in the blue. The Lord's return, you can read about that in Matthew 24, Mark 13 in the green. And the day of the Lord's return, it tells us that the Lord will return to the Mount of Olives. That is in Zechariah 14, verse 4. Then in the lower left of that first column, I have a miniature map of the map that I drew of the gates of Jerusalem, divided in quarters again. The Christian quarter in the upper left, the Armenian quarter in the lower left, the Muslim quarter in the upper right, the Jewish quarter in the lower right. Then we have the Temple Mount that is marked again, and I have the gates in red again. The only one I'm mentioning here is the Mercy or the Golden Gate, sealed since 1541. To the right of that in the brown, I have the Mount of Olives because that is where the Lord is going to return. And of course, this isn't to scale, but now you know where that is on a map. Okay, let's look at the stuff in Ezekiel. Now, the book of Ezekiel is prophecy. And in Ezekiel 8, we know that this is a prophecy about Jerusalem because it tells us in 8 verse 3 that he's going to Jerusalem. In the verses 4 and 5 of Ezekiel 8, it speaks about the north gate as well as in verse 14. But Ezekiel 8:16 says this. So he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and there, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces towards the east. And they were worshiping the sun toward the east. Now, when I say sun, I don't mean the S-O-N, I mean the S-U-N. And I think that this is pivotal because there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on with the East Gate. Okay, so those are some passages that you should read. Also, 8 verses 17 and 18, etc. Okay, Ezekiel 40, we're skipping ahead in Ezekiel, but Ezekiel 40 speaks about a vision of the new temple. And it talks about the outer court, the northern gates, inner court, dimensions, etc., cubits, width, etc., chambers, all of that. It speaks about the dimensions of the sanctuary in Ezekiel 41. But when it speaks about the temple of the Lord's dwelling place, the very first gate it speaks about in Ezekiel 43 is the east gate. And it speaks about the glory of the God of Israel coming through the way of the east. So Jesus is going to return through that eastern gate, which is interesting because that's the gate they're bowing at, worshiping the sun. So that passage, which is not on there, but it is Ezekiel 43, and you could just read 1 to 2, and that's going to tell you about the Lord returning at the east gate. What I want to do so we can get through this so that we are just 3 days is then get to the New Jerusalem. So it tells us that the New Jerusalem is coming from heaven in 21 verse 2. And then in verse 12, it tells us that there will be 12 gates. It says in 21 verse 12, it says this. Also, she had a great and high wall with 12 gates and 12 angels on the gates and the names written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, 3 gates on the west. So we know that it is a complete square because it tells us the city is laid out as a square. Its length is as great as its breadth, and that is in 21 verse 16. So it also tells us that it's 12,000 furlongs. So I know there's a lot here. We're almost out of time. Of course, we couldn't go through all of that, but the whole purpose of this was to kind of share with you all this information on the gates. We see that they're bowing and they're worshiping the sun in the east gate, and then lo and behold, that would be the gate that the Lord would return to. So I thought that this was fascinating. I hope that this was helpful to all of you. So armor up, we ride at dawn. May God bless you as always. Have a great day.